On today's Author Spotlight, I'll be speaking with George Fowler, the author of My Cuba Libre, Bringing Fidel Castro to Justice. George, what is the purpose of your book, and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Just to set the record straight about Fidel Castro, he's been in power for 54 years. He destroyed a nation, divided a people, committed over 18,000 political assassinations that continue until today. Today, he is torturing people in his jails. Today, he is attacking the wives of and mothers of the political prisoners in Cuba, known as the ladies in white. And the world needs to know about this. He is not some nice guy that took over Cuba and got rid of a dictator. He is a monster. He is a person who's an enemy of our nation, and he is allied with everybody who hates the United States.
Can you give me a little bit of the history of you and your family in Cuba?
Certainly. A lot of people tell me the Fowlers is not a Cuban name, but it is a Cuban name because we've been in Cuba since the 1800s. My ancestor came to Cuba as the Consul of England in Cuba. At that time, he actually supported the rebels against the Spanish government who had control over Cuba. That ended with the Spanish-American War with the United States. Teddy Roosevelt went in and supported the rebel war against the Spaniards. But then after that, my uncle Alberto Fowler, he fought against Castro as a Bay of Pigs invader, and I've been involved in the anti-Castro movement trying to free Cuba and the people of Cuba for the last 50 years, almost my entire life.
So how did Fidel Castro come to power in Cuba, and how has he managed to stay in control for so long?
Castro took power on January 1st, 1959. He came down from the mountains with a crucifix around his neck, claiming to be a Christian, claiming to be pro-democracy, denying that he was a communist. He took total and absolute control of the country. 9 days later, he stripped the population of all weapons so the population couldn't defend themselves. And thereafter, he's managed to keep himself in power by murdering people. He's murdered over 17,000 people. He imprisons people without a trial. He tortures people. If anybody speaks up against them, he takes away their right to work and get the little amount of money you can get working for a communist nation. And so he's in total and absolute control. If you decide to be a dissident, you are going to pay a very serious price, as we see happening today.
So, George, with these atrocities happening so close to our shores, why do you think that the U.S. has not intervened to help free the island?
I don't know. I wish I had the answer to that. I know that the United States declares Cuba to be a state sponsor of terrorism because of their activities. The State Department does that year in, year out. After the October 1962 missile crisis, President Kennedy agreed in exchange for the Russians taking the missiles out of Cuba never to invade the island. So perhaps our government is never done anything in honor of that outrageous agreement. The missiles, by the way, were not taken out of Cuba. My uncle, who's a Bay of Pigs invader and a CIA operative, showed me photographs of the missiles in Cuba after the missile crisis. And in fact, we do know that as of a few days ago, missiles were leaving Cuba for North Korea. So I don't know the answer to the question. It's a hard question to answer.
So the question now seems to be, is Castro a threat to the U.S. today? And if so, how?
Castro is a threat to the United States and has been for 54 years. He has 500,000 people, trained warriors, 90 miles south of the United States. That's a short distance. They have fought all over the world, in Angola and in Africa, in countries in Africa, all over South America. These people are trained warriors. Castro is also an expert in biotechnology, and he's exchanged information with the Iranians, and before with Saddam Hussein. He is close to all our enemies. I just spoke about North Korea and his relationship with the North Korean dictator over there. He has a control over the Venezuelan government. He had a control over Chavez. Chavez's bodyguards were Cuban, and the bodyguards of this new guy in Maduro are also Cuban. So he has a great deal of influence throughout the world to the detriment of the interests of the United States of America.
George, you're a practicing attorney. Can you tell us something about your attempts to bring Castro to justice?
Well, since I'm not in favor of any kind of violent activity against Fidel Castro, and I am a lawyer, I decided to try to bring Castro to justice through legal means by trying to get criminal indictments against him. I guess the first significant case I brought was in Spain after the Audiencia Nacional, which is the Spanish court, went after General Augusto Pinochet. I took that complaint and I replaced the name of Pinochet from Chile with Fidel Castro Ruz, and I brought action against Castro. And I obtained thousands of affidavits of people attesting to Castro's crimes. I've also worked really hard in the United States to get Castro indicted, and I'm still working for that. Indicted for the murder of the Brothers to the Rescue pilots. They were searching for rafters in the Florida Straits. Castro sent 2 MiGs and shot down 2 little planes, killed 3 American citizens and 1 permanent resident of the United States. 5 of his spies were convicted and sentenced to prison here in the United States, but no indictment against Fidel Castro. It's like indicting the monkey but not the organ grinder. And there's no doubt that he participated, that he gave the order. He should be indicted. I've also brought actions against him, many other nations trying to nab him when he used to travel outside of Cuba. He stopped after a close call in Santo Domingo.
So do you feel that the media has portrayed Castro in a favorable light to the detriment of the cause of justice?
Some members of the media have whitewashed Fidel Castro and his atrocities. I mean, right now, as we speak, people in Cuba are being tortured, imprisoned. You know, the wives and mothers of the political prisoners in Cuba, known as the Ladies in White, parade every Sunday from St. Rita's Church in Havana, and they get beaten up every Sunday. Very recently, Fidel Castro had Cuba's leading dissident, Oswaldo Payá, murdered. They rammed his car and knocked him off a cliff, murdered him. And the media doesn't cover any of that. We can go back to Herbert Matthews in the New York Times. He idolized Fidel Castro, made him out to be a folk hero. This goes back to the time when Castro was in the mountains. So the media seems to hide Castro's atrocities. They don't talk about his 18,000 political assassinations. He's a folk hero to many people in the United States, unfortunately, because the media has not done its job, or some members of the media haven't done their job.
Tell me about the Elian Gonzalez case, the boy that made it safely to our shores and then was shipped back to Cuba by the Clinton administration.
I ended up being one of the lawyers for little Elian, whose mother died, bringing him to freedom in the United States. The boat sank, and he ultimately was rescued on an inner tube by a man called Donato Dalrymple, who viewed the whole thing in some sort of a religious, mystical way, because he said that sharks were trying to get at the boy and porpoises were pushing him away. But ultimately, the boy made it to the United States of America. By law, he had the right to stay in the United States of America. President Clinton decided otherwise. And with the use of Janet Reno, who was our Attorney General, they took the legal action they felt necessary to bring the little boy back to Castro's Cuba, to the grasp and control of Fidel Castro, who was controlling the father. So the mother died bringing him to justice, and they used their guns to take that little boy back to Castro. And that little boy is jailed in Cuba. And you have hardly ever heard of Elian Gonzalez after he was taken back. That's because Castro has full and total control over him. It was one of the worst moments in the history of the United States. It was an atrocity.
The book My Cuba Libre, Bringing Fidel Castro to Justice by George Fowler is available on Amazon.com. George, thank you for joining us today on Author Spotlight.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.